Ultra-processed foods, which dominate much of the modern diet, pose a profound and often underappreciated threat to liver health. Unlike whole foods, which contain fiber, antioxidants, and naturally balanced macronutrients, ultra-processed products, ranging from packaged snacks and instant noodles to ready-to-eat meals and frozen desserts, are typically rich in refined sugars, trans fats, emulsifiers, flavor enhancers, and artificial additives. While these foods may provide calories, their metabolic impact is far from equivalent to calories from whole foods. The liver, as the central organ responsible for detoxification, lipid metabolism, and glucose regulation, bears the brunt of this difference, making chronic consumption of ultra-processed foods a major contributor to non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, NAFLD, liver inflammation, and systemic metabolic dysfunction. A key mechanism by which ultra-processed foods compromise liver health is through disruption of the gut microbiota. Emulsifiers, commonly used to improve texture and shelf life, can alter the balance of beneficial and harmful bacteria in the intestines. This dysbiosis increases intestinal permeability, allowing bacterial endotoxins to enter circulation, which triggers chronic low-grade inflammation. The liver, constantly filtering blood from the gut, is directly exposed to these inflammatory molecules, creating a state of immune activation and oxidative stress that promotes fat deposition in hepatocytes. Over time, this process can escalate from simple steatosis to steatohepatitis, fibrosis, and potentially cirrhosis if unchecked. Refined sugars and high-fructose ingredients in processed foods exacerbate the problem. Unlike the slower absorption of natural sugars in whole fruits or grains, the concentrated sugars in processed snacks flood the liver with glucose and fructose. Fructose is almost entirely metabolized in the liver, where excess amounts are converted into triglycerides and stored in hepatic tissue. Habitual consumption of sugary processed foods not only drives liver fat accumulation but also impairs insulin signaling, increasing systemic insulin resistance, weight gain, and the risk of metabolic syndrome. Over time, the liver becomes a metabolic bottleneck, overwhelmed by repeated sugar and fat surges, which accelerates oxidative stress, mitochondrial dysfunction, and inflammatory signaling pathways. Trans fats, another common component of ultra-processed foods, further worsen liver outcomes. Unlike naturally occurring fats, industrial trans fats are resistant to normal enzymatic breakdown, promoting lipid accumulation and inflammatory cascades in hepatocytes. Even relatively small, chronic exposures can elevate liver enzyme levels, increase visceral fat deposition, and impair lipid metabolism, compounding the effects of sugar and emulsifier-induced dysbiosis. Combined with other additives and preservatives, the liver faces a constant barrage of chemical stressors that whole foods rarely present. The dangers of ultra-processed foods are compounded by behavioral factors. These products are engineered to maximize palatability, often stimulating reward centers in the brain that encourage overconsumption. Because they are calorie-dense yet low in fiber and micronutrients, individuals can consume large quantities without feeling satiated, creating repeated spikes in blood sugar and liver fat accumulation throughout the day. Over years, this pattern silently drives NAFLD and metabolic dysfunction, often before any symptoms are apparent. Routine liver monitoring is rarely performed in otherwise healthy adults or adolescents, allowing damage to progress unnoticed. Children and adolescents are particularly vulnerable as processed foods dominate school lunches, snack routines, and convenience meals. Early exposure to high-sugar, high-fat, and additive-laden diets can establish lifelong metabolic patterns, increasing susceptibility to liver stress, insulin resistance, and inflammatory disorders. For adults, frequent consumption continues to burden liver detoxification pathways and can accelerate age-related metabolic decline, compounding risks for cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and hepatic dysfunction. From a preventative perspective, reducing ultra-processed food intake is critical. Prioritizing whole foods rich in fiber, antioxidants, and natural macronutrient balance allows the liver to metabolize nutrients efficiently without chronic inflammatory stress. Whole grains, fresh vegetables, lean proteins, nuts, seeds, and whole fruits support gut microbiota health, stabilize blood sugar, and reduce hepatic fat deposition. Even occasional indulgence in ultra-processed foods should be approached cautiously, as repeated exposure drives cumulative damage that can be difficult to reverse once metabolic and hepatic dysfunction are established. In conclusion, Ultra-processed foods are far more than a source of empty calories. They are a significant driver of liver stress, fat accumulation, and inflammation. Their combination of emulsifiers, trans fats, refined sugars, and artificial additives disrupts gut microbiota, promotes oxidative stress, and impairs hepatic metabolism in ways that calories from whole foods never do. Chronic consumption silently increases the risk of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, insulin resistance, and systemic metabolic disorders, creating long-term health consequences that extend far beyond simple weight gain. Protecting liver health requires conscious dietary choices that minimize exposure to ultra-processed foods and prioritize whole, nutrient-dense options that support the liver's metabolic and detoxification functions.